Well, hello there, and you join us here today in a brand new year, 2024, and it's time to ask ourselves the age-old question, should you buy an Omega Speedmaster or a Rolex Daytona? Whichever of those two watches you're looking for, you'll find them at watchfinder.com. There's also a bunch of nice little watches down just below. Check them out at watchfinder.com. Tom, there have been many battles raging since the dawn of time, and one of those is which is better, the Omega Speedmaster or the Rolex Daytona. What's your general perception on those two watches based on their history so far?
It's not something I debate a lot in my head, if I'm being honest.
Is that because you're already settled on your decision?
Well, we'll see, won't we? I'm more about what brightly coloured G-Shock is the best. But yeah, this is a good one as well. Let's see if we can make our minds up. And help the audience make their minds up as well.
Let's start with a little bit of history. We'll start with the Daytona. It was created in 1963, which is a fair old while back now, Tom. I don't know if you've noticed. And the version that we know, the one with the black or the white dial and stainless steel, first came out in 1988, which was a revamp of the original, because the original was actually this massive sales flop.
Right, yeah.
And with that 1988 revision came the waitlist. Yes, the Daytona is the watch that basically invented the waitlist and has been on one ever since.
Since the 80s?
In the 80s.
Oh, wow. God, that's a long time to wait, isn't it?
I think you might have slightly misunderstood what I'm trying to say, but the perception for most people is basically the same.
Yeah.
It might as well be since the 1980s. And then in 2016, they changed that stainless steel bezel ring to a ceramic one. Ooh.
That's a mini battle. What do you prefer, stainless steel or ceramic?
I think that might be too deep for us in this conversation, Tom. I don't think we have enough hours in the day to fully resolve that. Because also there is the addition in 2023 of why not both? Ceramic with a bit of stainless steel around the outside.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, they're trying to keep everyone happy. It does have a stainless steel bezel. See? Around the outside. Around the outside.
There you go. That, as Rolex is well known for, making customers happy.
And pointless changes.
So let's have a look at some of the pros of the Rolex Daytona. Number one is, it's the most famous watch in the world, I would say.
You reckon?
I think so. I think
Cool.
Of any watch, what is the watch that is most famous? I think it's the Daytona. Because also, it's a Rolex. And for many people, like, there are no other watches than Rolex. Rolex is the watch. Either get that or go home.
Yeah, if the Daytona isn't the most famous watch in the world, it's probably another Rolex, isn't it? Or a Casio.
Probably. And that other Rolex is the one that you get because you can't get the Daytona. The other benefit, the pro, if you will, of a Daytona, if you can buy it at RRP, is it's immediately worth a lot more than you paid for it. So it's like, imagine if you were to buy a car and you were to walk to the car shop and say, I'll have this car, please. And they said, yes, of course. Here you go. Here's the car. No. We won't take your money. It's no good here. In fact, have some more.
Wow.
And you drove that car out of the lot, as they say, in much of the world, with a bag of money on the passenger seat next to you with a big dollar sign on it.
Yeah.
That's what buying a Daytona is like.
Drove it straight over to the eBay lot and parked it up there.
There's also, with the Daytona, there's a good amount of choice. You know, you can have it in stainless steel with a couple of different dial colours. You can go like fancy into gold with like the Paul Newman style dial, or the Le Mans with the other kind of Paul Newman style dial, the Platona, which you can get with the blue and the gems if you want to. It's a nice selection of choice. It's not too overwhelming, but it's not like there's just one.
Yeah.
It's also a good size. I don't know if you've tried one on, Tom, but it's actually a lot smaller than you expect. And I think in a good way, in a way that watches are moving towards, where it's slim, it's slender, it's subtle. You can wear it with most things and it will blend in. It's not too ostentatious, unless you go for the Tigre one. But overall, it's actually a very, very subtle and well-judged watch.
Classic, sporty, safe design, I might say. I'm not sure how you feel about pushers and screw down pushers.
Well, if we categorize any functionality of a watch based on its fiddleability, you've got the turning bezel, which this doesn't have.
Yeah.
So instead, you've got the turning pushers. You've got two of them. You can whiz them up and down in a meeting and like try and beat your best score. And then you've also got the chronograph to time your score with.
Yeah. Got to twist something, haven't you? That is my... If I was a watchmaker, that would be my mantra that I would post above the door.
Yes.
Remember, when you're designing watches, gotta twist something.
Hans Wilsdorf famously also invented Bop It.
Yeah. Oh, that man. It came to him in a Victorian street fight, the idea.
Bob. It's like how I believe they fought in the old days.
Definitely, yeah. Queensby rules. I'll bop you, you brute.
The first Rolex ever stolen off a wrist in London.
Yeah, led to Wilsdorf's invention of Bop It. Good. Right, that's the history covered.
It's also an automatic watch, which is very practical. +2, -2 seconds a day, very accurate. 72 hours of power reserve. Gets you through a weekend. Let's move on to some of the cons, Tom, because there are a few, and they might be familiar. Number one, it's the most famous watch in the world. Because it's a Rolex. And some people really don't like that for many, many reasons. The first of which is people go, ew, like that's hipster, that's the thing, that's really obvious.
Maybe a little, might come across as being a bit superficial. Oh, you went for the obvious one that everybody likes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. The other drawback, I would say, is because it's so obvious, it's quite noticeable by some of those ne'er-do-wells.
Yes.
Would be my worry.
What was the advert where they said people will do anything for a something?
People will do anything for a something.
Oh, it was the Hublot advert with Bernie Eccleston with the black eye. People will do anything for a Hublot. The reality is that campaign applies more to Rolex. People will do anything for a Daytona. And perhaps slightly contradictorily, because that's a word, the watch might actually be a little bit boring.
Yeah, they're quite sort of straightforward in their design, very watch-like, which seems like a bit of a nitpick, but yeah.
I'd love to see you in a Rolex store trying stuff on, looking at it, scratching your head and saying, it's a bit too watchy.
Yeah, this one's a bit too watchy. Have you got anything else that's a little bit something, please?
bit more shiny. Not that shiny. Also, probably the biggest con for me of the Rolex Daytona is it has an absolutely rubbish history. They made it, it didn't sell. I think they hoped it would go to the moon as the Cosmograph. They were like, oh, it didn't. Let's call it the Le Mans. No, wait, let's call it the Daytona because that's the one we've got the rights to. The biggest claim to fame is that it was worn by a barbecue sauce retailer, Paul Newman.
Barbecue sauce?
You've not seen Paul Newman's barbecue sauce? This isn't like a euphemism or anything.
I thought you were talking about.
Can't say that. You've not heard of Newman's own sticky barbecue marinade?
I don't think I have. If I have, then I promptly forgot about it.
I am not making that up. Newman's own sticky barbecue marinade is a product of the famous man.
Oh, wow, yeah. They sell it in Sainsbury's. Anywho, so yeah, the thing about history, it's like, it's not, generally, I don't think it's number one on people's list, is it, when they're buying a watch? It's like, does it have good history? Maybe it is for some, but I do think it's funny how Rolex insist on calling it Cosmograph Daytona. I don't know why that's the case, but yeah, the main story is no one wanted one, and then Paul Newman got gifted one, and then it became popular.
Yeah, it even had a little nag on the back, didn't it?
Yeah.
Cosmograph. Yeah, I believe they called it that in the hope that it will be selected by NASA, and it wasn't. But it did go to space. Astronaut Michael McCulley wore it in 1989 aboard the shuttle Atlantis. Granted, he wore the older 6263 and not the recently released 16520, presumably because he couldn't get one because of the waitlist.
Sure, yeah.
So, Tom, we've covered the Daytona for now. Let's move on to the Omega Speedmaster, and then we can do some comparison. The Omega Speedmaster, it was created earlier than the Daytona, which I believe the Daytona was a reaction to the Speedmaster. The Speedmaster was created in 1957 alongside the Seamaster 300 and Railmaster, the Seamaster 300 being a reaction to the Submariner. Like a little bit of turf war going on between these two. It was, of course, certified by NASA, the Speedmaster, to go into space officially. And it was worn on the moon in 1969 for the first time. And in fact, it was worn on the moon a total of 6 different trips by a number of different astronauts. The Caliber 321 also, the original, that came back in 2019, which is probably the big news of the Speedmaster journey so far, and most recently.
That is a pretty looking thing, isn't it? The Caliber 321.
It is.
Straight away, that's working in its favour. And did you say something about the moon? That was interesting.
Yes, I don't think that's important, really.
Okay.
One, because as we all know, the moon is just a painting.
Yeah.
And two, the design, Stanley Kubrick came up with a design for the moon back in the day.
He was a clever man, wasn't he?
People don't realise that before he designed the moon as we know it today, it actually looked very different. It had like a face and wore a little hat.
Yeah, sleeping cap.
So yes, pros for the Speedmaster. It did indeed go to the moon many times. And despite the collusion between the Americans and the Russians to keep the whole hoax a secret, many of us believe that actually happened.
Fools.
It's cheaper than the Daytona by a considerable amount, £6,600 versus £13,200. Arguably better looking than a Daytona, and at least more original looking. So if you like the vintage style, you can't really get that with the Daytona. You have to stick with the Speedmaster. And as you mentioned, Tom, you get to see, whether you get the 3861 or you get the 321, in the back, you get to see a lovely, lovely hand-wound chronograph, which is a very rare thing these days. You do have to go up to the £7,700 version for the sapphire case back, but I think it's worth it. It's a beautiful looking movement, and you can actually make a purchase of one at your leisure. Let's move on to some of the cons of the Speedmaster. Let's start with choice, because I think the Daytona has a good amount of choice. With the Speedmaster, you can pick from 97 different variants.
Wow.
You can choose manually wound watches. You can choose automatic watches. You can choose from the 3861 or the 321. You can choose from the professional range or the heritage range or the dark side range or even a digital range. It's so out of control that they even have both of the Apollo 8s listed, with and without the Saturn V rocket secondhand. They are both available.
Yeah, that's a lot, isn't it? As you said, the Daytona, small selection, and there's no bad ones really, is there? There's not like, the main one, that's the good one, and then a load of other sort of consolation Daytonas. They're all great. And there aren't any bad Speedmasters, but there are some kind of quite wacky ones, some really, really expensive ones. Usually you just want to go with the first one. That's the main one, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then the rest are all sort of gold remixes and whatnot. Yeah, so I think that's always been Omega's problem over Rolex, isn't it? Their catalogue's a little bit flabby in comparison.
And you rarely see people with collections of different Speedmasters. They usually have like one, maybe two, and that's it. They have the original one of the special edition ones, and then that's kind of it. Whereas with the Daytona, people often end up going, oh, I really like the gold one on the rubber strap. Oh, I really like the platinum one. Oh, I really like the stainless steel one. I'll have that in both colours, and they end up with a whole collection of them. Also, Tom, the prices have been going up of the Speedmaster, and whilst the entry one is somewhere around just under half the price of a Daytona, the new Apollo 8 is £13,500, which is £300 more than a Daytona.
Yeah. On the flip side, though, you can get a plastic cover version, which is £1 million cheaper than any Daytona.
Yes. Answers on a postcard. Is that actually a good thing? And despite, Tom, there being 97 variants, the one variant that I hear requested the most, which is Hesselite on the front and Sapphire on the back, doesn't exist, and Omega is refusing to do it. So 97 choices, and none of them are the one I want.
Do they do Hesselite at all on the front?
Yeah, so the entry level 6,600 is Hesselite on the front, metal on the back.
Yeah, right.
And then when you go to Sapphire on the back, it's Sapphire on the front as well.
Sapphire on the front. Oh, that's annoying. Yeah. You want the warmth of the plastic on the front, but you still want to appreciate the movement.
Yeah.
Shame.
Thanks, Omega. Also, unlike the Daytona, because you can actually go and buy one in store, that does mean that it suffers from depreciation, and you will lose 1,000 or so walking out of the store. Not a problem if you buy pre-owned, and not a problem if you plan on keeping it, but it is a downside in comparison to buying new.
Yeah, not a problem if you plan on like just buying it and wearing it and enjoying it and owning a watch.
I mean, people do all sorts of crazy things these days, and if they're going to buy their watch and actually wear it, then who am I to judge?
Yeah.
And probably a nitpick. The professional Speedmaster, 50 meters of water resistance versus 100, so you can't really use it as your swimming pool watch on holiday like you can with a Daytona.
Yeah, that's fine.
Not a problem with that.
No water on the moon, doesn't matter.
Well, there might be, Tom. We'll see what Stanley Kubrick has to say about that. So we come to the conclusion, Tom, having heard all of that, having discussed the pros and cons of the Speedmaster versus the Daytona, which would be your pick and why? Don't say G-Shock.
Yeah, I was actually going to say Seamaster 300 is better than both of them. But it's a tough one. Yeah, I mean, Rolex is Rolex, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But then it's so Rolex, it's scary out there to wear a Rolex.
Is it two Rolex?
It's two Rolex now. Everything's just two Rolex. This channel's two Rolex. Sick of it. I'd go with the Omega.
Interesting. Yeah.
On that note, save some bunts and go and tell people about the moon, how it went to the moon. Did you know it went to the moon? This is a moon watch. Moon. And go about my day.
Yeah. Leaving all in your wake. Flabbergasted.
Yeah. Mooning people as I go.
I believe the Speedmaster has more history. It looks better. You get to see that beautiful hand-wound movement if you pick the spec right. There's just everything about it is really, really beautifully wrapped up in a lovely, lovely package. However, I would have the Daytona. And you know what? I can't explain why.
Probably something to do with Rolex.
But probably because it's a Rolex, yeah. And I am, indeed, an attention whore.
Because you listen to Tito and Chips, or whoever they are. Who are they?
Tito and Chips.
That Rolly Rolly song. What are they called?
Oh, Ayo and Tio. You think about that?
Oh, yeah.
Tito and Chips.
Tito and Chips from the 1930s with their new hit, Roly Roly. Was my Roly Roly, I left it at home.
Yeah, those guys. That's what you want to do.
Well, there you have it. Ultimately, the conclusion is that no one can really decide what they want. It just sort of happens in here, and that's the right answer. So until the next time we talk about Rolex, make sure to Rolex your Rolex. Good Rolex.